Okay, so the research that I'll be conducting is on immersive STEM professional learning and then testing a 4-modality model. The 4-modality professional development model is an immersive workshop for teacher professional learning in the summer. And that's coupled with job-embedded sustained support. So there's an offsite aspect to the research with the immersive workshop. And then the job-embedded sustained supports, the 3 modalities from that are having a mentor specialist come on site and come alongside teachers one-on-one to support them just in time with answers to questions, feedback, strategies. So just having that job-embedded one-on-one support. Then the professional learning community is the 3rd modality, dedicated to STEM plus C collaborative time. And the STEM professional expert partners who are tasked for outreach in the community. So this would be anyone from university to industry and business coming alongside teachers in the classroom and also during the immersive workshop to help support teacher learning. So preparing K-12 educators for effective STEM plus C learning. STEM plus C stands for STEM plus computing. We've gotten used to the STEM acronym, and I think what National Science Foundation and others have recognized is that the T in technology was taken in by teachers to mean, how am I using technology as a platform for learning? What am I doing with apps? What am I doing with online resources? How am I using technology to express learning? So with word processing, using Word, using Google, using Microsoft Excel or spreadsheets, and presentation platforms. So anything that, your PowerPoint or Prezi presentations, and that was technology. But what is really more important is understanding that computing and computational thinking have taken on a higher order thinking skill that has been neglected as far as our intentionality in helping students to learn how to think computationally and how to use those computational thinking skills in order to facilitate problem solving, transdisciplinary problem solving, as a matter of fact. So we're looking at ways to help teachers to learn both STEM and C integrated learning strategies. So now it's not just about understanding what your core disciplinary ideas and teaching in the 3-dimensional way the Next Gen Science Standards was written and designed, but also incorporating strategically computational thinking and learning. So the primary challenge is assessing how our 4-modality intervention changes teacher confidence and implementation across 3 demographic contexts. If it doesn't work in one area, then we have to fix that. So basically, we're looking at testing it in rural, urban, and Native American learning communities. And then we're looking to see that this evokes invested, immediate, and long-term change among educators. So it's not just a short-term fix, it's something that becomes a way of professional learning, a model that is replicable and sustainable, and that it increases content STEM plus C depth of knowledge. It increases applied understanding of STEM plus C integrations, thereby increasing confidence in STEM content and pedagogies and increasing implementation in STEM plus C integrated learning. So the last 2 are really the learning and education outcomes that we're looking to measure. Increased confidence or changes in confidence in STEM plus C content and pedagogies, and changes or increases in implementation of the integrated learning in classrooms. Our second challenge is identifying barriers to implementation in the 4 modalities in different demographic contexts. So if we just ran this as an intervention and we didn't pay particular attention to what things are barriers for each modality or barriers for the model as a whole, and implementing it to its maximal effectiveness, then we wouldn't be addressing equity, really. We would be ignoring things that might be, if we overcome those barriers, we would be able to really support teachers in a certain demographic learning context more than if we ignore those barriers and we just say, oh, well, it doesn't work there. That is not helpful. So we actually have to identify those barriers and then look to our stakeholders to start brainstorming solutions to the barriers, overcoming them, and then seeing if those solutions work so that we can really promote the full modality approach in every learning context. So we have done some pre-study baseline data acquisition through Qualtrics. We had about 174 participants in a survey, teachers in kindergarten through 12th grade. And some of the things we learned are that confidence teaching grade level computing and coding activities is relatively low. So there are teachers that are fairly confident, you know, in teaching grade level computing and coding, but there are more teachers that are not confident or just somewhat or fairly confident, which means there's a lot of room for improvement there. And then confidence guiding computational thinking in class. This is an interesting question because you'll see in the next slide, we realize that there's a 25% of teachers in the elementary don't know what computational thinking actually is. So confidence, if we have no confident or somewhat confident, some of those teachers might be actually not realizing what computational thinking is. Fairly confident and very confident, we do have, 40% or so of our elementary teachers seem to have confidence in computational thinking guiding that in class. Then our next question is, when we unpack what is computational thinking to teachers, maybe it's just math-centric, maybe it doesn't cross disciplines, and we really do want teachers to realize that computational thinking is transdisciplinary. So there is room for improvement in our understanding as educators of educators. What is it that they're coming to the table with in their understanding of computational thinking? And how can we improve that so that it becomes more transdisciplinary? Also, teacher occurrence, guiding computational thinking in class. So this is implementation. This is implementation of learning opportunities that actualize computational thinking among their students. And so we actually saw this result when we asked if you were not familiar with computational thinking. We had almost 25% of our elementary teachers in that realm. And so there are teachers that guide computational thinking in class occasionally, often, and very often. But anything from occasionally to rarely or never, you really see that there's a lot of improvement. If 35% of our teachers are occasionally guiding computational thinking, that's still an improvement. There's still a lot of improvement that we can do. So the theoretical framework came out of research in best practice for professional learning, and there were 4 best practices that were identified that each individually have good results for professional learning outcomes. However, they also have deficits. And when you combine these 4 modalities together, each modality overcomes a deficit in another modality. So when we look at the immersive workshop or just the workshop and conference in general, a lot of research has indicated that teachers have a great short-term gain of content knowledge and skills, and then that gradually just decreases over time, so that their retention rate may be like they've dropped 50% of their content knowledge 6 months away from that experience. So we're looking at year-long job-embedded sustained supports that continue to feed and fuel the teacher's level of content knowledge, depth of knowledge, and then their depth of knowledge in pedagogies that either sustain what they've gained out of the workshop experience or increase what they've gained out of the workshop experience and magnify that. So that the research has indicated that with these deficits could be overcome by coupling or partnering modalities. So we ended up choosing 4 modalities that had the highest level of teacher learning outcomes, so that they could complement one another when being used concurrently or in tandem. So this theoretical framework also encompasses an immersive learning component. That immersive learning component is to be able to have that hands-on investigative inquiry-driven approach that teachers would experience themselves, so that they can actualize that for their students. They come at it from a student perspective in their own experience. They see where students might have questions, where students might get hung up or discouraged, and then they can see how they would overcome that in their own classrooms by experiencing it immersively themselves. It also relies on, the framework has developed the maximization of the professional learning community, where sometimes administrators utilize that community when they bring people together to just do data analysis. Sometimes Collaboration is confused with, just coordination. So we're coordinating, but we're not collaborating. So we're misusing the professional learning community sometimes. And we're not allowing for teachers to use them intentionally in certain foci. So we are asking administrators to work with us to create face-to-face time with teachers and professional learning community time a few times a month that's just dedicated to STEM plus C integrations. And they can have horizontal and vertical collaborative conversations that way. And then the last thing we were talking about was partnering with local professional experts. This bridges the gap between university, industry, business, and the K-12 environment. And it brings people from all of these different STEM plus C professions into the classroom, into teacher space, into student space. And it really paints the picture for different pathways into these professions, so students can see that. And it also shows how, in context, these professionals use their STEM plus C training, their depth of knowledge, their skills and experience. So how do we integrate computing with the job that I am doing in ecology or with NOAA? And it just makes contextual, real world, authentic sense. There are a few variables that we're looking to address. The independent variable, of course, is that the 4 professional learning strategies, the modalities themselves. We know that there's a potential for a moderating or mediating factor in the demographic learning context. And we're not sure if it's going to be moderating or mediating, so that's part of the investigation as well. How the rural and the urban and the Native American community contexts affect the usefulness of this 4-modality approach. And then the dependent variables are measuring teacher confidence in STEM pedagogies, and then the rate of teacher implementation in STEM plus C integrated learning activities. So the hypothesis then would be that by offering teachers the opportunity to utilize 4 different modalities to increase their own learning, that they would have greater long-term retention of content specific and just transdisciplinary STEM plus C depth of knowledge and applied understanding, that they would increase in their confidence, and then by increasing their confidence, they would increase their own implementation of STEM plus C learning experiences in the classroom. So the teachers, the sampling methodology will be to ask MESA teachers, new and established MESA teachers, to volunteer, to self-select, volunteer to be a part of the research study. And so then from the volunteer pool, we will randomly select teachers to be a part of cohort A or cohort B. This study is going to be probably fairly limited in its scope, so we'll have maybe between 16 to 30 participants in year 1. And then once the idea catches on, we may have more participants in year 2 that are actually at schools where MESA is a program, but we may be working with non-MESA teachers at that point, which would be very exciting. Cohort A will be the treatment group in year 1, and then in year 2, cohort B will receive the intervention. And so then it becomes, cohort B is the control group for cohort A. Obviously, there are threats to validity, the external validity, including that the schools aren't randomly selected. They're ones that MESA is already participating in and having programming in, and that the population sample is minute. But we're hopeful that that population sample will increase in year 2. So the ways that we're going to be measuring teacher shifts in confidence and in implementation are with pre-tests, post-tests, teacher surveys, and teacher self-reflection, observations and feedback, and then student surveys to be able to understand better from the student perspective how things are shifting and changing. The design is a quasi-experimental design. It's a combination double pre-test and switching replication design. So this involves pre-tests that are taken during the immersive workshop, then post-test at the end of the immersive workshop, and then delayed post-test at the end of first semester and at the end of the school year, which then becomes the comparison for the next year as well. So we'll have all new teachers will take pre-tests at the immersive workshop. All cohort A teachers will take post-tests at the end of the workshop. And then we'll just continue to compare delayed post-tests So cohort A will be able to experience not only the immersive workshop, but all 4 modalities throughout the course of year 1. And then cohort B will be able to also experience the workshops in year 1 and then in year 2. Both cohorts, again, are in the immersive workshops, but cohort B gets the full 4 modalities, and cohort A has the option to selectively pick which modalities they'd like to participate in. They are not excluded from modalities, but we will be documenting which modalities and how often, how frequently they tap into them, and then if there's any correlation between those cohort A teachers' selection of modalities and their confidence and their implementation. So cohort B and cohort A are going to be compared, and then cohort A is going to be compared to itself in year 1, and how, if they've selected not to have any supports in year 2, are they able to sustain their confidence and their levels of implementation? And then if some teachers are still needing to tap into some of those supports, which is super normal, does that enable them to sustain their confidence and their implementation? The feasibility of this study is high based on the fact that MESA is accountable to the state legislature for providing data that indicates that what we're doing as a program is increasing teacher capacity and is increasing student capacity. So while we're not directly measuring the increase in student capacity in this research, we are evaluating student growth in 21st century competencies, because that's what we do in MESA. So we'll be continuing to do that alongside this, this research. And also providing the legislature with an understanding of how the MESA program, by increasing teacher capacity, does facilitate better student learning experiences that then prepare them for real world applications and for STEM professions. So it's college and career readiness. If our teachers are not prepared, then our students are not prepared. So the curriculum is in place for teachers to use in integrating STEM plus computing in class. And that is huge, because then teachers don't have to invent that wheel. So MESA has a curriculum, and so then by supporting the teacher learning with what is a STEM plus C integrated curriculum, what does that look like? The curriculum is in place for them to facilitate and implement. And what that looks like is, here's an example. Students 2 years ago who went to the national championships from Salk Middle School had used coding and circuit boards to create a prosthetic arm that was incredibly useful and very effective. And then the students were explaining what their prosthetic arm data indicates for the effectiveness of the arm itself to judges. And then down below, there is an ultrasonic sensor that students program to light up based on the proximity of an object to the person. And students in Inchalim, in the Native American school there, use this because they were aware that there are students who have sensory issues and they need people to give them space when they're talking. And so they would wear this tool, this product, this sensor, and the light would indicate to a person approaching that they have come far enough. And if you go further, the red light comes on and indicates that you've crossed over into the person's comfort space. And so then that person can initiate a conversation with whomever's approaching them and saying, thank you so much for respecting my space. I have a sensory issue that, just really my comfort level is best served when you're standing where the light is yellow. And so then that can help facilitate that conversation. I thought it was brilliant, and I'm super excited to help other teachers be able to provide opportunities for students to create these kinds of human-centered design solutions and community solutions within their own communities that are meaningful to them and increase their capacity to think computationally in ways that serve others.